Okay, בבקשה, you're very welcome, Reb Meir and Reb Michael.
Okay, so maybe I'll just start. It's quite a long Mishnah, and so we'll see how much we succeed in reading. And there are expressions in this Mishnah which are quite difficult to comprehend, especially in, let's say, our time. Again, this is a text. This is the last of a series of Mishnayot which go back to Hillel. This is a whole series which we've read, the old Hillel, who we already met from the first chapter of Pirkei Avot. I'm not going to speak more about. We're not going to cover anything about Hillel and where he came from and his personality and so on. All that has been, I think, appropriately covered in the previous shiurim. And this is the last of a whole series of Hillel, which I think it has a lot of important messages for that time and for our time in its basic message. I think we should first read the Mishnah, and then after we read the Mishnah, we can look a little in the building of the Mishnah and then go into the details together. And Rabbi Meir will then come in with input, and I will put in input, and we can see together how this will develop. So let's just read the Mishnah. He used to say, again, Hillel, we're talking about Hillel. Hillel used to say, the more flesh, which is, what is flesh here? Flesh is, we're talking about eating big quantities of meat, right? We're talking about flesh here is eating big quantities of food, of meat. The more flesh, the more worms. Again, you can translate this in different ways and look at it in different ways, but we follow the translation here. The more property, the more anxiety. Also here, the word anxiety, this is according to the present version we have of the Mishnah. There are other versions, older versions of the Mishnah, which don't use the word da'aga, which is worry, anxiety, but have a different expression, which is davon, or diyun, or din, which means you come to a lot of, davon means agony, or diyun or din means you come to a lot of court cases. You're always in trouble. You're always in trouble, which is a different expression than anxiety. Right? Marbe nashim. If you have a lot of wives, again, this is a period when in Judaism, when you're allowed to marry a lot of wives, then you have a lot of more, the more witchcraft you have. We'll go into also what that means. Marbesh fachot, the more female slaves you have, the more lewdness you have. The more slaves you have, the more robbery around you have. These are all of these expressions up till now are all expressions of things which have to do with possessing, if you can say it in such a way, have to do with around you, which are things which in itself are legitimate or permitted. if done in the right way, in the correct way, it's permitted to eat, it's permitted to marry, it's permitted also to have a slave or somebody working for you, but all of this in the right proportion. But if you do it in a totally unproportionate, exaggerated way, then it becomes, everything goes wrong. So this is the first part of the Mishnah. Second part of the Mishnah are things which you can do in an exaggerated way. The more Torah, the more life. The more sitting, yeshiva, the expression is yeshiva, it doesn't mean yeshiva in the modern expression of yeshiva, but the more but it is sitting in the company of scholars. That means sitting in a way of learning in this way, although it doesn't mean yeshiva in that form we have. The more sitting in the company of scholars, the more wisdom, the more counsel, the more you take advice, the more counsel, the more understanding, the more charity, the more peace. And then the Mishnah ends with an overall, with two overall expressions. If one acquires a good name, he has acquired something for himself. And if one acquires, and now you need to roll down, Moshe David, if one acquires for himself knowledge of Torah, he has acquired life in the world to come. Well, these two expressions conclude our Mishnah after the different more negative expressions of the more and the different positive expressions of the more. So with that, I conclude the reading of the Mishnah, and I would like to have the more wisdom and insight from my colleague, Rabbi Meir, please.
Thank you very much. Shalom to all of you. Shalom to Moshe David and shalom to Rav Michael. Thank you for leading us on a good path into this Mishnah. As you heard already, there are two clearly, the Mishnah is divided into two parts. In the first one, you add, you increase, and it is negative because it causes something bad. In the second part, the more you add, the better it is. Adding leads to something good in the second part. Perhaps adding as such to that you want more, perhaps that's part of nature of man. And therefore the Mishnah stresses, it doesn't say do less, but it says you should direct your desire to have more to the positive part of the Mishnah. But my friend, that is not enough. We should try to pay attention also to the fact, as I think Rabbi Michael said, that in the first part, it's a matter of something that is in your possession. It's yours, which is not the case in the second part. But I would try to show it with one example here, and that is in the, let's call it the negative part. He who increases property, the more property, the more anxiety. I would like to stand on that one. What does it mean? And my friends, we find in different places also here in Pirkei Avot an idea of not having so much property, not to have too much. In the beginning of the 4th chapter in Pirkei Avot, they put a question and they ask, who is rich? Who is rich? And the answer is the one who is happy with his lot, what he has. He's happy with what he has, and he doesn't feel he has to have more and more and more. That's a famous story that I probably told already. That's a matter of old teachers. They tell the same stories again and again. But anyhow, I'll tell this story. It is told about the Chafetz Chaim passed away in 1933, and he was almost 95 years old, I think. And the story is that a wealthy Jew from America came to visit him in Radin in Poland in the beginning of the 20th century or sometimes. And when the visitor entered the flat of the Chafetz Chaim, he was surprised that there was almost no furniture. So he asked him, "Honored Rabbi, where is your furniture?" He saw a bed and a table, and that's it. The great rabbi answered by a question, "And where is your furniture?" "I," replied the guest, "I'm a guest here." And then Chafetz Chaim answered, "I'm also a guest here," the rabbi said modestly. And the story has an important message, though I think, in brackets, I say, we don't have to feel that we are guests. We read this morning, V'ha'aretz natan livnei Adam, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the earth to human beings. But it's ours, but we are like guests here, and we don't have to have so much property all the time. Judaism, though, doesn't advocate asceticism, that is not to have and live in a way that you don't have anything. No, not at all. But on the other hand, the increase of property leads man away from perhaps being able to turn to the spirit. With spirit, I especially mean to turn to your fellow man. You are sort of more free and more open to the world of our Creator, His world with the human beings, when you don't have heaps of property, which, as Rabbi Michael said, then you worry all the time. You have to go to court cases again and again and again, and you worry that you lose it, and so on. And we should be open to something else. Perhaps I stop here. I would like further on try to show you how the sort of positive part of the Mishnah perhaps teaches us how to not be in the first part of the Mishnah. But if Rabbi Michael wants to come in.
Well, I would like to say about the comment to what Rabbi Meir said now, that part of this concept of that we're guests here and about property, and there is a comment, two things I would like to say. First of all, directly to the story of Chafetz Chaim, a beautiful story. And this is, of course, directly, it connects to the expression in the Torah, where the Torah says, Li kol haaretz kerim v'toshavim atem imadi, that the whole of the land, talking about the land of Israel, but talking about the whole of the world. The whole of the world, the whole of the land is mine. It belongs to God, and you are temporary citizens here, which means a lot. It means a little bit about how we treat the environment. It also means a lot of how we relate to property, to ownership, to sovereignty, and it has consequence for many other issues. Also issues of I'm the owner, I possess this, I possess the land, it's mine, it's this, I have the power to do this, I have the power to do that. It's a whole attitude issue. It's a modesty towards land, towards other people, towards property. That's one thing. There's one comment also to the more property, the more anxiety. One of the commentators brings a story. It's a small, cute story, but it tells you something about in a time when the world wasn't as virtual as it is today. It's a story which one of the commentators bring about two people who are relatively well off, and they take their whole fortune and they dig it into somewhere in their yard, this fortune. Now, one of them, there is a thief who sees this, and he comes and he steals. He sees where this is, and he steals the whole fortune. But the man who owns this, he doesn't know about this. So he continues the whole of his life as if he has the fortune and he's with good people and wealthy people, and he acts the whole life as if he has a big fortune in his backyard. The other one, he forgets where he's dug his fortune. So he digs in the yard, he doesn't find it. So he's very, very sad and troubled and totally crushed because he's lost his fortune. But he's actually not lost his fortune. The one who's lost his fortune, he's very happy. The one who hasn't lost his fortune, he's very sad because he doesn't remember exactly where he's dug. So the story says the whole thing is the question of how you comprehend things. And one day I had a friend a billionaire friend, he's still around, but he's become a little senile, and he had billions of dollars, but if the what do you call it, Bursa, no,
stock exchange.
The what?
Stock exchange.
The stock, yeah. If the stocks went down 2 days, he was convinced that he wouldn't have butter to put on the bread in a couple of weeks. He had billions, and you couldn't comfort him. He was always concerned this, and I've never been worried about the stock exchange. There's never been a worry. I have a lot of worries in life, but not that. Never been worried about the stocks. So this is an expression really of what the things you can be worried about in life. What is your main concern in life? And I think that that part of Judaism says something about what you do about ownership. Because Judaism says that when you own something, you have to do such a lot. You have to give away, you have to give, there's a 7th year, and then there's a Jubilee year, and then there's Trumot, and you have to give a 10th, and you have to give Trumot to the different this. Trumot and Masrot. You have to give. You have to go up to the temple in the holidays, and you have to buy sacrifices, and you have to give tzedakah. You have to give charity, and you're not allowed to take interest. You need to give loans, and you need to. And there's so much. So you have, even when you have own some money, there's so much you need to do with that, the money you own, that the Torah says to you, really, okay, you think it's yours, then there's such a lot you have to do with it in order to make it fair and reasonable. So this is also part of how we look at money at all in the Jewish tradition. I give the word back to Meir.
Yeah, thank you. I think I asked this question a few weeks ago when we talked on one of the Mishnayot. I will soon continue with the text. Do you think one is able to speak about today when it's such the individual is in the center of the picture. Are we able to speak about, once we spoke about histapkut bemuat in Hebrew, to have an ideal of have a little less, not an ideal of living not in a normal way, but I have a feeling that we are not able to speak about ideals of not. And what do you say about that? Can we lift such a voice? What you talked about just now.
I think that this is if it's possible, first of all, it is possible. I think it is possible, and I think many people do it. And I think that, I think that, well, first of all, it's of course the essence of this Mishnah, it's obvious. And I think that also we live in a life, I've had a week this week when I've seen so many tragedies and difficult things happen. And to look a little in proportion of your life, you can have, it doesn't matter how much you have, and suddenly you have an illness or an illness in the family, or something happens around you, and suddenly you see things in proportion. What does it help you? You have so much, and God forbid you sickness, heart sickness strikes you, and all the plans don't help. Nothing helps anything, and I think that this is also part of the first expression, really the eating of the meat, the eating, the extravagance, and so on, and then come the worms. So there are those who interpret it in different ways. What are these worms? If it has to do with eating the body when you're in the grave? But I think it's not only that. It is that it's not something which, it's not there for it's not there for keeping. It's not, these are things which are one day and which are not the next day. And it's not, and I think also in our world, I think that even with the individualism and the people want more and more, and nothing, you're not satisfied no matter how much you get. You don't, it never satisfies you. I once asked a billionaire, I said, what does it help to have, how much money can you spend? You can have an airplane, you can have a yacht, you can have, how many cars can you drive in? How much? But you still want more and more. Nothing will satisfy, because you always think, what will happen? How much can what do you need? How much do you need? It doesn't help anything. You're always greedy. If greed is an important part of your life, it doesn't, then it eats you. It eats you. That's the word. Those are the worms. They eat you.
Very nice.
So,
okay, please
continue. Okay, I can also continue if you want to continue with the Mishnah.
I'll go to further, and then I'll give you the. Okay.
Moshe David, can you put it up again?
Yes, I'm trying once again.
And I start speaking. I would like to show you that perhaps if we concentrate on the second part, we can educate ourselves to leave the first part of it. And if you don't find it, I can just quote. I would like. Okay. So if we, just a moment, if we go a bit further down, more, please, further on in the text. Yeah. I'll take one of these, and it says, the more charity, the more peace. And that's interesting, because I would say the more charity, it's better for the poor. What has it to do with peace? The more charity, the more peace. And there is a wonderful and meaningful midrash that explains this, I think. I think one of the commentators here brings it. The midrash goes as follows. So I try to explain to you how charity brings peace, what it might mean. So the midrash says a poor man is sitting perhaps outside somewhere, and he is complaining. It tells us the midrash. Who am I and who is that man? Asks the poor man. You'll soon see who that man is. That man, says the poor man, sits in his house, and I sit here. That man sleeps in his bed, and I sleep on the ground. These are the words of a poor man that sees another man who has perhaps a wonderful house and where to sleep and so on, and he sits someplace outside, and he's thinking, who am I and who is he? Well, what's going on here? And then the midrash turns to the one who gave money to the poor person, and it says to him, and you stood up and gave him. You gave him money, you helped him out. I see it as if you made shalom, peace, between me, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and him, the poor man. That's the end of the midrash. Hashem says that when I gave money to that person who was complaining, it's sort of that you made shalom between Hashem and the poor man. Why? Because in the creation, there are differences, of course, between poor and wealthy. But the poor man in the midrash is right when he complains. And apparently, it is our task to create a better world where the poor might be much less poor. And he won't see these enormous differences. And then there will be peace between him and Hashem, because it is as Hashem says, he is right. It's not the way it should be. And in this midrash, it's obvious that it should be unaccepted, such a way, that there are differences like these. And then this Mishnah turns to us. We have a mission. We should give charity or whatever it would be to bring shalom between the world and its creator. When we have a mission like this, then I think to have more property seems to be pale and not important at all. That is, I found something meaningful to do in this world. That is sort of the second part of the Mishnah, and it in a way erases your strive to have more and more in the first part of the Mishnah. Okay, so far this is.
Okay. Thank you. Beautiful. I think I would like to relate maybe to the first expression here,
Please,
in the second part.
Yes.
It says, the more Torah, the more life. You could say the more Torah, the more wisdom, the more Torah, the more understanding. Why the more Torah, the more life? It's a question. You can ask by the way, a lot of questions on this Mishnah, which if we had 6 hours to go through the Mishnah, we wouldn't be able to answer all the questions. But I think that every expression in the second parts of the Mishnah relates to parts of the first parts of the Mishnah. So, and that's why it relates. The more Torah, the more life relates to the very beginning where we say, you think that you get a better life when you eat well, when you eat extravagantly well, and that gives you a good life. You have a very good life then. And the truth is, so the second part comes to say, the more, if you really want a good life, the more life, a long life, there are all kinds of expressions in the Torah, and now we're talking about that you get a good life, a long life, if you study Torah. Now, I think it also doesn't necessarily mean long life because we know that it doesn't always have to do with age. It has to do with life here, has to do with content of life, substance of life, meaningful life. That by just having big meals or more property, and again, the first parts of the Mishnah, you also see that one thing leads to the other. As the expression is, Avera goreret Avera, that one bad deed, one sin, one acting. If you're in a streak of doing bad things, then one thing leads to the other. If you start showing off by having extravagant meals and so on, then you need also to show that you will have lots of property. You have lots of property, then you will show off by having, again, in that time, having lots of wives. The wives, they need then female slaves, because that's what they had. Every wife had a female slave. You need female slaves. You need then also male slaves. Why do you need male slaves? Because you have lots of properties, lots of land. You need male slaves. One thing leads to the other. One thing, but what kind of life do you sit with? Okay, so you've taken care of. You sit with lots of stuff, right? Lots of things, lots of this. But what content? What values? What real life do you have? The real life you then have is if you have more Torah, more mitzvot, more values, also more gmilut chasadim, is also part of Torah. Torah is Torah with gmilut chasadim. So this is the more Torah, the more life. It goes back to the more flesh, the more worms. Also goes back to that. I think that is one thing. It's like the opposite of what is in the beginning of the Mishnah.
That's of course very true, and that's nice. And I think I can build further on exactly on what you said. If we again look at the end of the Mishnah, it's interesting because we have listed all the let's call it the positive parts of the Mishnah. That is, we have here a man who has learned Torah. He's been sitting in the company of the scholars, and he has counsel with others, and charity, peace. We talked about that. And if one acquires a good name by all these things, all these good things, he got a good name. He has acquired something for himself. One acquires for himself knowledge of the Torah, he has acquired life in the world to come. Now, I didn't like that because it seems to be kind of a contradiction between the one who has acquired a good name because it's for himself, whereas if he has knowledge of the Torah, it's for the world to come. But I found a commentary which I like very much by Baal Tosfot Yom Tov. I think he has the longest name in the list of our great rabbis, Rabbi Yom Tov Lipman, Wallerstein, Heller. He was a great teacher. He was a pupil of the Maharal from Prague, and he explains this in the following way. He says, if one acquires a good name, he has acquired something for himself. What is a good name? He studies Torah and so on. He promotes peace, tzedakah, and all that. Then he has given himself an identity. He explains it, it's something for himself. He has got atzmut. He uses such a word. He sort of makes up. He has sort of created himself. I've got an identity. When do I get an identity? Is when I've sort of painted myself in a color. I am something. If I only eat a lot of flesh and all that in the beginning, and have a lot of property, it's sort of outside me. I haven't done anything with myself. But if I've done all this, I have sort of created myself. I've done myself. And that is la'atzmo, it says here. Then you can continue, not as a contradiction, and say, and if you learn a lot, it's also for the coming world. But then we actually say, and that is what Rabbi Michael said also, I think, before me, that during this second part of the Mishnah, I become something. And I've done it because I try to study, I try to counsel with others and so on and so on. Then I am something. I've done something with myself. And not only do I have heaps of properties outside someplace, and I haven't done anything with myself. And I think that's a nice.
Meir, I opened the Ikar Tosfot Yom Tov on the side, the one that you mentioned.
Oh well, oh yes, thank you. In English even. Okay, yes, that's exact. It's not the Ikar, I think that's it. The business expired, yeah, and that he has acquired his essence, atzmuto. Yeah, that's exactly it. Okay, yes.
Actually, I asked this afternoon, because I had already prepared teaching this Mishnah. So when I was in the Beit Knesset this afternoon between Mincha and Ma'ariv, so you have to fill the time between Mincha and Ma'ariv. So I thought, well, I'll prepare myself for teaching tonight. So I'll teach this Mishnah in between Mincha and Ma'ariv, although it's shorter time. So I asked them why. I asked them a question, a little different here. What Meir asked. I asked why somebody who buys a name for him, acquires a name for himself, acquires a good name, he acquires something for himself. I asked a little different. Why only when you acquire a name, a good name, do you acquire something for yourself?
Yeah. Okay.
Why not when you acquire Torah, or when you acquire wisdom, or other things? Everything you acquire for yourselves. Why only when you acquire a good name do you acquire it for yourself? Do you acquire for yourself? Everything you acquire for yourself. Which is a question which Abarbanel asks here on this Mishnah. But my audience in the Beit Knesset came up with the following answer, which I think it's nice, and it relates, I think, also maybe to what also the Tosfot Yom Tov says. You could at least relate it. He says like this, that when they said that when you acquire Torah or wisdom or counsel or something else, then you don't only acquire for yourself, you share it with others. A good name, this is something you acquire for yourself. This is something which is yours. It's not, you can share also, but it's something you acquire for yourself. A good name. It's Tov Shem, Mishem and Tov, which relates, of course, also to the beginning of. It's an expression of King Solomon that the name is something which stays. It's stuck with you. It's your identity, as you said. It's who you are. It's what sticks with you even after you die. So everything else, everything you possess, everything you own, everything this you don't take with you when you die. Nothing you take with you. The name, what you've done in this world, what you have worked for, this is something which sticks with you, and this is yours and only yours. Everything else you're supposed to share with others. So that's why it's you buy it for yourself. You acquire it for yourself. A name. Of course, that's not the purpose why you do things. Otherwise, it's just running after honors or something. That's not.
It's very good, very good. I would like to say, perhaps does man, if we leave the first part of the Mishnah, then I don't get all the time property and money and so on. Okay, so I left that. I continue your thought or your audience thought, and then you come to the second part, and as you said, you do good things and so on. Perhaps still do we have a need to have something for ourselves in order not to lose ourselves? I am I, and you are you, and then we are allowed to say, if you have a good name, that's what you've gained, sort of, and perhaps a good name here is not connected directly to the Mishnah that I studied Torah. So what do we usually mean by good name? Someone who keeps what he promises, is a straight person, and so on. And then from that he gets a good name, and that has to come in here. It's not enough studying and doing all kinds of things. A good name is still important, but it's okay. I don't know.
Well, I think it is included. I think it is a summary of all the things which are before, not in a limited way, but what is Torah is everything. Torah is studying Torah, but it's also doing mitzvot. And it says, it's Torah. It's sitting in the company of people who it's counsel. It's charity. It's how we deal with other people. It's how we relate to other people. It's wisdom. It's understanding. It really it includes all the things which are how we act in this world. The second part of the Mishnah has really all the elements which then, if you possess them, then it's everything. That is, then you have an identity, then you have a good name. This is that is a good name. What is there beyond all those things? Everything can be included under some parameter of this, I think.
Yeah.
Rav Michael, if I may comment, maybe not only on a ideological level, but both back then people were being pulled very strongly into the Roman culture as people today are being pulled in. And maybe this Mishnah is answering that, saying you do have something. In other words, why do you want to have a building named after you? Why do you want to have something? You want to feel respect and honor. So maybe it's not the highest level, but maybe it's a token saying, if you really want something, then what is better than having a good name?
Yeah.
Maybe it's an answer to those who are being to give you something to help you not be pulled in the wrong direction.
By the way, you mentioned Tosfot Yom Tov, who was the one who came with the interpretation. He is one of the most important commentators to all of the Mishnah. There's a story about him that there was in his town. I think it was in Krakow. I'm not 100%. Maybe it was some other smaller town in.
It was in Prague for that, but
no, but he didn't die. He didn't live there.
Oh, okay.
He didn't live there. He was a pupil, but he didn't. He didn't live. He didn't function there in his life. Somebody can Google it while we're talking. In any case, there was in his town. It was there was a person who was known as a famous, very, very stingy person. He was very known, and when he died, they buried him in the corner of the Bet Olam, of the cemetery, because he was so stingy. Nobody wanted to be buried with him. Now, the Tosfot Yom Tov knew that he acted as if he was very stingy, but he was really the most charitable person there was in town. He just didn't want anybody to know about it. So he acted as if he was very stingy. He didn't want everybody to know that he was the one who was giving all his money away to charity. And so when Tosfot Yom Tov died, when Yom Tov Lipman died, he asked to be buried at the corner of the cemetery next to this stingy person. And at the corner of the cemetery, instead of getting the honorable place of one of the giants of the Torah where he would normally be buried. So he asked to be buried next to him. And there's a whole story of how this then developed, this stories about his descendants and so on, whole story which comes after this. But this was
so both of the rabbis here are correct. He was the chief rabbi of Prague in the middle of his life. From there, he moved to the Ukraine, and then he was later one of the two chief rabbis of Krakow, where he passed away, as Rav Michael said.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think what you said, Moshe David, is true. I think it's true also that it brings you away from a good name is better than lots of property. That's a part of it, I think, for sure. That's Tov Shem Tov Mishem and Tov. You're right. The question I would like just to end. We are coming to an end now.
We haven't heard about the witches. Are you both have?
Yeah, we leave them for next time.
Okay.
We can talk about the witches if you want.
Yeah.
The idea, of course, was this was a time when people when we have it also several places, both for both men and women had witchcraft, and the belief is that these are bad things which are forbidden according to the Torah, witchcraft, and therefore this is something which follows along again with extravagance, both witchcraft and sexual transgressions and theft and all the bad things which come along if you go if you do if you extravagant in an excessive way with what if you do in a proper way, if you marry in a proper way, if you everything. I mean, just to give you an example of the greatest, let's say, the greatest figures of the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu and Avraham Avinu. Moshe Rabbeinu had one servant, right? He had one servant, and that was Yehoshua ben Nun, and even he was not with him the whole time because he never left. It says he never left the tent. He had one servant, and Avraham Avinu had. It says he was Ariri. He was alone. He had just Damesek Eliezer. It was Eliezer. So these two, that was what they had. They didn't have, even though they were the giants of the Torah, they didn't have lots of servants and to serve them. So this is, I hope answers your question.
Yes, thank you. And
Rabbi wanted to say something.
Yes.
No. I just say that we just read the last week in Mechashifa Lo Techayeh, where they put witchcraft together with women. That was such kind of a belief, and Rashi says that was the usual. But there are also men. But of course, we live in a completely different.
I think still
and I don't think
there are different places in the Tanakh where you have witchcraft with men.
Of course,
it's a men.
Yeah, there's still places in Scandinavia till this day when they celebrate the days that they used to burn the witches on the seas in the fires. So it did exist also, and unfortunately, many of these women were gypsy women or Roma women that were caught and blamed for such things.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you, and thank you for Yayi in the chat for the reference to Kohelet, the 5th chapter, which is very relevant to everything that we are learning here. And have learned today. And just as a closing thought, even recently, you have the great giants in the Jewish of Torah today, and you see in the funerals you have hundreds of thousands of people who are following them, and they have a small apartment like the Chafetz Chaim had, with maybe a table and a small light, and all they do is learn Torah all day. So what are you left with when you have hundreds of thousands following you in your funeral and you lived in such bare necessity? So we hope that we take the second part of the Mishnah from our learning today and figure how we can take this drive to do more in the best of ways. And thank you, Rav Michael and Rav Meir, very much for sharing your wisdom and Torah with us tonight. And thank you to everyone who has joined, and see you Bezrat Hashem next week. Lehitraot.
Thank you very much.
Chodesh Tov to everyone.
Leila Tov.
לילה טוב.
לילה טוב.
לילה
Thank
טוב,
you.
חודש טוב.
להתראות.
לילה טוב.
לילה טוב.